The Everything Apartments podcast are provided with support from the Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles, better known as AGLA, serving residential landlords throughout Southern California through education and advocacy. Visit aagla.org. Welcome to the Everything Apartments podcast. I'm your host, Eric Christopher, and on this podcast, we cover all topics of multifamily investments from buying and financing properties, day-to-day operations and management, and reinvestment strategies. Title insurance is something that we as property owners are all aligned with, but it's one of those things that everyone uses, but very few actually understand. To round out the recent sales series episodes that we did, I figured it'd be a good idea to take a quick drill down on this aspect of title and title insurance, how it affects us as owners, and what we can do prior to a sale or refinance to pave a smooth road in front of us with the aspect of title and title insurance. And we have a great guest today to help us drill into this briefly, and we'll get her right on. But first, I'll tell you about our firm, WSC Realty Advisors and WSC Property Management. WSC has been helping buyers and sellers and managing apartment units in Long Beach for over 19 years. Let's say you're tired of managing your units, or you're just not getting the response or the reporting level from your current manager. We can definitely help. WSC never wants to be the biggest firm in Long Beach. Instead, we stay a little smaller and more agile to bring the quality you want. We can also help if you're looking to acquire more units either here or maybe an out-of-state exchange scenario, which more and more people are looking into these days. Visit WSC-PM.com. Call, text, or email us. All that information's in the show notes, and if you're watching on YouTube, it's obviously right next to me. Mention the Everything Apartments podcast and get your first 2 months of management absolutely free. Whatever your challenge is with your property, WSC has the solution. Today we have with us Caitlin Stearns, who is a vice president with Fidelity National Title, one of the big boys. Caitlin has been in the title space for over 40 years, and she's a great example of somebody who's probably seen it all, starting as an assistant way back when to a title team, and has worked her way up through the ranks to where she is today. And from her experience, foundation in property research, and all the mechanics that go in the title process, she's a great resource to have with us today. Caitlin, it's great to have you.
Thanks so much for having me. Looking forward to it.
Perfect. Well, as I mentioned in the intro, I think almost anybody that's ever bought or sold real estate has seen the title entries on the closing statement, and a lot of people would understand kind of what it is, but then the inner workings of it. Maybe in plain English, how does title insurance compare to other insurances we all may have, and what does it actually protect against?
I love it. Great question. And you're not alone. And so many people don't know what title insurance is until they're buying or selling or refinancing and they see it on their estimated closing. What title insurance, and one of the main differences is a lot of insurance you have, it's protecting you in the future. It's protecting something that may come up in the future. And title insurance, what we do is we look at the chain of title. So we're looking at all the documents that have recorded on a particular property. And we're looking for any deeds, loans, deeds of trust, anything, reconveyances. We're comparing everything. We're looking at it and the history of the property to make sure that when that new buyer comes in, or if it's a refi, the lender, everything is clear. There's nothing that's going to come up later and where someone's going to say, oh, I have an interest in this property, or I was owed money on this property, or something like that. So we're clearing everything. We're making sure everything's been paid off and the buyer has clear title.
So past events versus contingencies in the future, that totally makes sense. And then it might go hand in hand with why there's just a one-time premium rather than the monthly installments that we make on other things, because you're basically like sort of limiting the exposure to loss to the past and not to future. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
The other thing that it took me a while to figure out was that there's two sides of that coverage: owner's policy and the lender's policy. Tell me how those two interact.
Absolutely. So anytime you're buying real estate, you need to get title insurance. There's two policies if you are getting a loan. If you're buying cash, it's just going to be one policy. But there's a homeowner's policy, and that is ensuring the homeowner that everything's clear and they have clear title. And if you are getting a loan, the lender will not lend without having their own lender's policy. And that's basically ensuring their position, that they are the first loan, that there's nothing ahead of them, that they know, they have the right to foreclose if they are not paid. And it's really important. They know everything that's against it as well, because they're lending a lot of money on it. They also want to make sure title's clear and there's no issues.
Absolutely. So you got the owner's side and the lender's side. When anybody thinks of insurance and you see all the ads and all over the place about get the best rates here, get the best rates there. I guess like without going too deep into it, the underwriting process, are there differences in coverage levels or inclusion? Sort of like, a lot of insurance companies on the property and casualty side, they're saying, okay, we'll offer you this coverage, but as opposed to last year, we're going to exclude flood coverage, or we're going to exclude mold or something like that. Are there deviations in how much companies charge, and is there differences in coverage?
Yeah, again, great question. We're all highly regulated. So as far as cost goes, we have to use our posted rates. We are under the Department of Insurance. We all have our fees that are posted. We have to go off that. So there's not a lot of change. You're not like, from one year to the next, everything's changing. And we're all pretty close and competitive. As far as different coverage, usually for the residential properties, there's a certain coverage with it's the ALTA, CLTA homeowners policy. Vacant land may have just a CLTA policy. It just kind of varies, but you would always know up front, because when you get your prelim, it will state on there what policy is going to be issued.
Vis-a-vis the other types of insurances, it may not be that fruitful to like try to shop rates on title insurance. Company A, B, and C probably pretty close on rates because they're published and the underwriting is very similar.
I would not have that be the first thing that comes to my mind for title insurance. I mean, you want to work with a company that, if something happens, that they have the reserves to pay a claim if needed. You want to work with a company that for the service. I mean, there's so many different reasons, but we are all so close on costs that it's like that would not be my first.
Talk a little bit about exceptions and why I bring that up is I had some success years back with your partner, and what a lot of times happens is you may have a professional principal in a transaction who has a relationship with you all or someone else, and the same goes with like an escrow company. But in a lot of cases, the principals sort of let the brokers and the escrow kind of direct, like, oh, we just generally use Michelle and Caitlin. There was an issue, and this goes back quite a few years with your partner Michelle, where we had opened title with another firm, and I don't even remember who it was, and it doesn't matter. But there was an exception on the prelim, a lot of waves around it, and it didn't seem that monumental, at least to me at the time. And I thought, well, you know what? Maybe there is some differences in underwriting standards and preferences or aversions to certain risk. And lo and behold, I called your partner Michelle up, and you all were able to insure around that exception, which surprised me because in my mind at the time as a younger broker, I thought, they all have the very same risk profile or risk of, formulation models. Maybe that's not quite as standard as I thought it was. So that was kind of a breath of fresh air. It's like, hey, maybe this company right now with their underlying guidelines, they're tighter on their standards, and maybe this company is hungry to achieve more business, and we'll say, hey, we'll maybe write this more pragmatic fashion. And I didn't really realize that happened.
It does. It definitely does. So we do that a lot, where we're like, okay, if you get a no from someone else, please bring it to us and we'll talk to our underwriters and see what we can do. I mean, we all have certain guidelines that we follow, and there's some things that no one can work around or write around. We will look for the solution. Absolutely. And sometimes it's just pulling out some more information, getting more documentation, reaching out to different parties, depending what kind of issue it was. Right before I got on the Zoom, I was on the phone with my title officer working through a couple of unsecured tax liens, just what the situation was and were they our party. And we did some more digging, and that's what we do. I mean, we dig through it. We see what we can find out. We were comparing signatures to see if it even looked like the same. I mean, we go down this whole rabbit hole to see if we can make it work and find a solution. And that one we did. So
a lot of back office data analysis sort of rings out forensic accounting kind of stuff, whereby you guys are, I mean, literally putting that chain together, looking for those clouds. Now, on that note, because a lot of listeners say, hey, great, I already knew what you're telling me about what it does and how it's paid for and all that good stuff. But maybe hint on, let's say somebody's coming up to, they're going to sell a property next year, or they're planning to refi soon. What would be your advice to them to begin the process now so that there aren't any surprises when they get into the window where they want to be doing something, to say, oh no, it's going to be delayed by X because of this. What could principals do earlier than later to make sure that the title side is smooth when they get to the batter's box?
I love this question because I am always out there telling everyone order your prelim early, 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 early. But there's even before that. So to any property owners, keep an eye on your property. Keep an eye on your order a property profile. Reach out to us. We would check it. You want to know what is recorded on your property. We have come across right now something that happens often is they think it's in the trust. The owners had it in a trust. They maybe took it out years ago to refinance. They did not put it back in the trust. Now those parties cannot sign or have passed away, and now we have an issue. Things like that, like check your property, check how your property is vested. One very easy way to know is look at your tax bill, your property tax bill. Does that come in the name of the trust? If it does not, and you have a trust, you need to do some checking into things like that. So I would look for your vesting. I would confirm how you're holding title. I would look at what loans are against it. Is there an old loan that you know is paid off, but the lender never recorded the reconveyance? Things like that come up often, and it's so much easier. Let's get it done when the clock's not ticking because we have a closing date.
Yeah, and a lot of stuff, I could just envision, something as silly as a property tax bill. Say, oh, that should be very obvious. But you get those things in the mail, you know what it's for. You're not really looking at the addressee on it. You're just
No.
looking at how much you don't want to send them all this money, right? And
Right.
just like you're saying, investing. I had a transaction with three siblings, two of which I was working with, and it really sort of surprised them that say, oh, sibling number three, who's kind of estranged, lives out of the country. They, let's say sort of forgot about her. Oh,
Right.
well, we need to track her down in somewhere in South America to make this thing legit. So certainly that sounds reasonable, 6 or whatever, 9 months ahead of when your action plan's supposed to start, getting that prelim open and just kind of seeing what the world thinks is there against your property. The other fun story I had was, and this goes way, way back, that property had been in the same family for 6 or 7 decades, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
I guess it'd be third generation of ownership with no debt for a good share of that time.
Mhm.
And what I learned from that was you all have a easier, quicker, streamlined time with something that's had some activity in the last,
Yes.
4 or 5 years, because you've got either yourself or another title company that was kind of picking up to that point in time where they either refinance at that time, that you all would kind of look at that with a little happier face and going, wow, we
Mhm.
really have nothing on this thing for like 40 or 50 years, and may make your job harder.
It does, definitely. And so much property has changed hands a lot, so it's not as common, but we do come across those where we have to go to the back plant or the Hall of Records to look at the very old document, that we don't have on the computer as quickly and easily accessible. So sometimes those searches take a little longer because we're having someone actually go to the Hall of Records
Yeah.
to do the search.
Somebody's got to go to some warehouse that I always envision would look like the Raiders of the Lost Ark, where everything's just
Yeah,
covered in,
exactly.
and,
Big
it's like,
books.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
written in calligraphy. But no, I mean, it makes sense because
Mhm.
if you had something that had activity on it 5 or 7 or even 10 years ago,
Right,
okay, somebody at that got happy up to that point, and maybe we
right.
could rely a little more, just more on the recent years than having to bite off on all,
Mhm.
multi decades or whatever like that. And on that very same transaction, the other funny thing that I learned was some of these liens can stick around. And like you're saying, if they don't open the prelim or have knowledge of what's going on, because we got
Mhm.
into escrow, the title open, and they said, there's a mechanics lien on here. It's only, $5,000 or $7,000, but it was from
Yeah.
1992. Luckily, I think that might have been the one that you all might have wrote
Mhm.
down, kind of said like, hey, the dollar amount's so small and it's so long ago that we're okay with the risk factor on this.
Mhm.
And that was it. That was very interesting. I didn't realize that stuff could stay on there for a very long time.
It will. And then one that we run into that can sometimes cause some delays if it's an old deed of trust that maybe it was a private beneficiary and it's a deed of trust, you think like, oh, it's past its time, it's so old. But those private beneficiary ones, those title company will look at depending on the amount and when we might want a little more information because we don't know. It's not like a mainstream lender that they just didn't record the reconveyance, and we know that they didn't know to file the reconveyance, but it also may be that it was never paid, and someone later is going to say, hey, I was owed money. So those private beneficiary ones, we're going to want some more information on those. So if you have that situation, get your reconveyance or a paid in full letter or something and hold on to it.
Absolutely. That goes into being prepared in advance because a lot
Yes.
of this stuff, just kind of thinking through it, you go, mechanics lien from 20 years ago.
Yeah.
It was probably just not finished out as far as closing out on the file. I do, understand that there's just sometimes inaccuracies that take a phone call or an email to, oh, you know what? Yeah, we should have pulled that off. And
Yep.
that's just a little bit of time and headache.
The goal is to not have anything come up, and that's why we're doing so much research and asking for so much documentation, because we want to make sure everything's clear, because we don't want anyone to have to go through that. But yes, I mean, they do happen. I mean, across the whole title industry, all companies, everyone, there will happen. And that's why I mentioned in the beginning, you want to make sure you're with a company that can take care of it. Right now, the first thing that comes to my mind as far as what title companies are looking for right now, as far as claims, and that we see industry wide, fraud and forgery is a big problem. And so we're really, really digging in and careful on that. That's kind of what the current market is seeing. And it's more family members, someone signs, says they have the right to sign, things like that. It's a problem, or people impersonating owners. And I mean, I've had situations like that where someone pretending to be this person, and the neighbor's like, that person has died. Like, find out by chance, like, this stuff happens.
For more
So
fraud in the world now than ever, right? I mean,
there is. So fraud right now is an issue. That's why we are very proactive in getting a lot of information. I had one years ago that it was a HOA that had foreclosed, even though we were in escrow and everyone was notified and we were paying it off and everything was good and we were before our time. Someone didn't talk to someone that was servicing the loan, and the sale went, and that was a mess to undo and everything. So stuff like that happens. We jump in, we do what we need to do to get it cleared up. Title insurance is important, and people don't realize how important it is because they think, oh, it's been in the family forever, or I don't feel like I need it and I'm paying cash. It's a large purchase. It's a large investment. It's like one of everyone's biggest assets. Have that protection, because I hear and see the things that can happen, and you want to make sure you have coverage.
well, absolutely. And when you look at it in the context of cost versus total investment, it doesn't even move the needle.
Right, exactly.
We'd all rather keep money in our pockets than send it to something that, we don't get something shiny and fun. Getting back to that fraud thing, I've heard a commercial on a podcast I listened to. It's been on there for about a year and a half, and it did sort of point out this sort of like protective service around your title,
Yes.
whereby, strangers could come and basically fraud their way to ownership of your home, and you wouldn't even really know it. That
Mhm.
must create higher costs. I mean, have you noticed any increase in premiums because of that module? Like, is it causing you all more legal? What has that done to your, prices and ability to like transact compared to before?
I think as far as prices, I mean, the rates, we have not changed ours recently, so we're good on that. I think what we see is more work up front to protect everybody. We are wanting, and again, this is industry wide, title industry wide. We want more documentation. We're like,
Mm.
I need to see that trust from before, or I need you to come sign in a Fidelity office. I need to see that you're actually who you say you are. We need copies of IDs. So certain things we want a little more documentation, because we don't want it to happen, and we're trying to protect everyone so that no one gets that phone call afterward. No one wants that. So we're
Oh,
doing a
monster.
little more, and we get some pushback. Why do you need that? Why do you need the whole trust? Why do you need this or this? Which I understand. I totally get that, it's personal information, but we need to make sure that that person has the right to sell that property. That's a big
A little off the topic, but kind of related, is I met this old broker a couple 15 years ago, and he was pretty old then. He was operating in Long Beach in like the 50s. And
okay.
he said, "Hey, Eric, you want to see something funny?" We were out at a property, and he handed me a copy and the purchase and sale agreement and the deposit receipt from 1955 or whatever was one single page. It was one page. I guess it might have been two-sided, so maybe two pages at the most. And I talked to another broker in my office about it at the time, and he goes, "Yeah, everything was a lot more simple before everyone started to sue and steal from each other." right? And now you've got
Absolutely.
contracts that are umpteen pages long, and it's the same. It's kind of the same for everything now, right? Like
Yeah.
there's too much fraud, especially with the advent of technology. It's easier than ever that your job gets harder.
Like I said, a little more complicated things. We just want to make sure everyone's good. That's our
Gotta
goal.
do it. Since this is a multifamily based
Mhm.
podcast, is there any differences you could describe, if there are any,
Yeah.
between title going between a single family or a multifamily apartment or a retail strip center for, commercial for that matter? Are there any things that go on different, that multifamily owners might be thinking about that single families don't? Maybe there are some nuances between the product types.
Ownership, investing, things that we need, documentation we need. That's the same across the board. Or entity docs, because a lot of income property, they own it as an LLC or something. We need all that documentation. So that's across the board. I would say some of the other things as far as multifamily or commercial of any type is, just looking at how many parcels are in it, really seeing what the property's made of, easements, things like that, plotted easements on a map. I just had that question yesterday. I needed the easements plotted, and that was on a commercial transaction. So they know where they sit on that plot map, things like that. But a lot of it's the same. I mean, mechanics liens, or if they're doing construction, we may need an indemnity package. So we may require some more information. I'd say that might be something, but
Single family tract in Orange County, the pun intended cookie cutter, right? Whereby,
right.
my studies in other states and stuff is you get out in like rural where, where exactly what is the property survey and
Yeah.
who owns this.
Mhm.
So obviously, yeah, the product type and what's going on around the ownership structure, I guess, would be the overall answer. Let's say, taking your advice from earlier, saying, okay, I'm going to sell or refinance it later this year or whatever. Is that something they contact you direct on to open up to get a look at the prelim? Or how's the best way for, let's say, a principal that's listening to this right now says, yeah, you know what? I'd like to take that first step with Kate. How should they do that?
Absolutely. Reach out, call me, email me. I'm happy to do that. We get those calls a lot. We get those calls from the agents and the lenders, of course, in the beginning stages, but also from owners. This morning, I just talked to an owner. She's going to be listing in a year, but there's some preliminary stuff we are working through. So I'm doing a little searching for her on a property that she inherited. So things like that come up a lot. I'm happy to search it. I'm happy to confirm vesting if anyone, needs to do that, or send them a property profile that'll tell you what loans are against it, who the owner is, copies of your documents, things like that. Let's be prepared and proactive and get it done early. Please, please, please.
Sure. Open the file up early, get a preliminary look at
Right.
it, help the owner get a smooth road in front of them for that aspect, because there'll be plenty of
Absolutely.
other speed bumps in any old escrow that you have. Caitlin, thank you. I'm going to put your contact information in the show notes. And if anybody out there has questions about title, or they're thinking about doing something 6 or 9 months or more down the road, sounds like a pretty kind of like a no-brainer thing to do, to just check that little aspect now so that your plan goes more timely than maybe it did if there was something in there that you didn't know about at the time. Caitlin, I really appreciate you being here with us. I learned something new from every guest I've had on this show, and today's no exception. I knew what it was, and I've been around it for a long time, but hearing a few little details that, I might not have ever heard from anybody, it means a lot to me, and I'm sure it does to other people that are active out there. So I really appreciate you being with us today.
Well, thanks so much for having me. It was fun. Always good to chat.
This has been the Everything Apartments podcast. I'm your host, Eric Christopher. Stay tuned for another episode coming soon.